Hey howdy hey, welcome back to Trek on the Tube and welcome back to another review video. Today though we're not talking about Star Trek, we're rather talking about something Star Trek adjacent. That's right, this is my review for The Orville Season 3, aka The Orville New Horizons. Now before we get into this though, I need to do this. It's the YouTube game, it's how we play it. Like, subscribe, comment, share, hit the thanks button, it helps me out a lot. You're the best. If you've only started recently watching, my channel, or even Star Trek or The Orville, the reason why I review this show on this channel is because it's what I like to call, Star Trek adjacent. Just like, Galaxy Quest is, for example. See, this show pulls from Star Trek. It was inspired by Star Trek. It owes its very existence to Star Trek. But The Orville is also, in many respects, a love letter to Star Trek, and pretty much the closest to Star Trek a production can be without being one. I know. I've already gone off on a tangent. I haven't even told you that there will be spoilers yet, so let's get into this properly. This video will indeed contain spoilers, and it is about a season that is pretty much, in every respect, its own show. Now you can go back and watch my first 2 season reviews. You can also read pretty much any blog post online about this show, even current ones. It'll all say pretty much the same thing. This is, in essence, a Star Trek show. Now some people like to make the extravagant claim that this is the best Star Trek show currently being released. Others like me simply like to say that it's too heavily enveloped in what Star Trek is to be able to be its own thing, but the point is, it always comes back to the same view. The Orville is not its own show. But that's changed now. Or at least for me it has. Look, I wanted to make this review without mentioning Star Trek even once, because I legitimately feel like Season 3 deserves that respect. But it was impossible considering how many fans, creators, other online personalities keep claiming that this is the quote-unquote best current Star Trek. So instead of ignoring that completely, I did this. I recapped my sentiments from my first 2 season reviews. Yes, the show was still unable to fully come out from behind the shadow of the giant that inspired it at the time, but I take a stand and say here and now that all of those who continue to make that claim in a positive or negative way are wrong. There are things I enjoyed in Season 3, there are things I did not, but let me be very clear in saying those things are the Orville things, not Star Trek things. Okay, alright, I think that was a bit of a bizarre and convoluted way to start this thing off, but at least the message is clear, and we don't have to talk about that anymore, so let's get into it. The Orville, Season 3. This season is somewhat at once both a soft reboot, but also a direct continuation of the seasons that preceded it. Now, what I mean by that is that from a story perspective, from a narrative standpoint, every episode, every arc builds onto what we saw in previous seasons. There's a natural flow and growth to both the characters and the world that they're living in. Where it kind of feels like a soft reboot, however, is in its format. As we mentioned earlier, the season was given a subtitle, New Horizons, and this is connected to the fact that Fox was bought by Disney. What that means is the show now belongs to Disney, and under this new leadership, new decisions were made. I'm not going to get into all of the behind-the-scenes stuff, because, that's not what we're here for. But what's worthy of note is that this restructure affected the show's format. This season was delivered in 10 episodes rather than 13. Yeah, I know, Bob. Just don't pay any attention to him. He's talking about how Season 1 was 12 episodes and Season 2 was 14. They were supposed to be 13 each due to some sort of delay or mishap, or I forget what it was. They displaced one of the episodes. Anyway, 13 episodes. That was supposed to be the original release kind of format. 10 episodes was what we got for Season 3. And all these episodes were over an hour long, averaging at about an hour and 20 minutes. Not only that, but from a production standpoint, you could actually tell that the show was permitted to do more with, their VFX budget. Enhance the sets they already had, as well as create new ones. Honestly, I think that even people that don't care or don't know anything about the production of the show would have noticed this sort of a soft reboot, so to speak, in the delivery of it. That being said, as noticeable as it isn't disruptive. The episodes are longer, and that did make the more boring ones a little tougher to get through, but on the other hand, it made the more enjoyable ones that much more enjoyable. And this whole switch up and enhancement of production quality seamlessly played into the show's many interweaving storylines. I think the only thing that really stood out as odd was the elongated, rather intense introduction of the new shuttle in the season premiere that basically led into nothing. I mean, it takes something like 8 episodes to ever see that thing in use again, and the use itself didn't even really feel necessary. I don't know. The show just flexed on us, like, ooh, look at what we built, look at what we got, and then nothing. I mean, the fucking thing almost felt constantly in the way. Every time we cut back to the shuttle bay, there's this damn useless pointy thing right there in the middle that they even have to dodge at one point when coming in with another shuttle. Just move it to the side, push it away. But hey, that's the only not so seamless thing that came from the changeup. When it comes to the season itself, I think it was probably the most enjoyable so far. A lot of the humor has been completely removed from its DNA, and for the most part, the comedy now comes from like a few specific characters. The general goofiness has disappeared, and though this did permit the writers to really nail those emotional, dramatic storylines, I did prefer the balance they had found in Season 2. Season 1 was too dumb, too silly. The comedy undercut the importance and the value of what the characters were doing, and what the audience was learning, but removing that humor almost entirely this time around has somehow affected, I don't know, the general lightheartedness of the show. So yeah, but other than that, I mean, the stories being told were actually for the most part pretty good. Granted, a few of them sometimes felt uninspired. I think it was Mortality Paradox, like, goddamn, did that thing flatline from beginning to end. And look, I gotta be honest with you, A Tale of Two Topas, that whole thing, it's not working for me. I think every season review I do, I come up here and I lay out my gripes with this growing Markland storyline, which encompasses quite a lot of things now. In terms of feminism, bigotry, persecution, and all of those themes, I don't have any complaints. The drama of it is great to watch and witness, and as a fellow Kiwi, I can only be proud to see the wonderful Rena Owen on screen. But the damn Topa storyline, I don't know. I understand the importance and the desire to write about the non-binary, trans, intersex community and struggle. I see the value of depicting stories that people within those groups can relate to, but Topa isn't working. And I think it's because the show is somehow hiding behind the excuse that Topa was born female in the first place. Like, I can't help but feel that her story is a very, very different one from what a lot of transgender folks are living through. To me, the whole Topa plot is much more about women's rights and ingrained perpetual sexism within a society than it is about gender fluidity or gender identity or even sex change. There's like a misstep in the allegory going on. I can't exactly put my finger on, or maybe I just don't have the words to explain it. I mean, keep in mind though, I'm a cis guy, so you know, I could be missing out on things, be it story elements on screen or real life experiences. I'm coming at it from, you know, where I am. Anyway, most of the other stories were great. Not only were they able to enhance and deepen the character stories that were going on, but we also got a lot of lore expansion and a lot of kind of like world building going on in this season. Oddly paced, sometimes these episodes were, like, episodes would kind of slowly move their way toward what they were trying to showcase, but they would do it so slowly that sometimes, you know, the build-up or the resulting weight could take a bit away from the value of the watch, but more often than none, the conclusion had an emotional impact that truly moved me. I even said something to this effect on Twitter about how these episodes are very bizarre to kind of like review and react to, because they take you on a very long journey. An hour and 20 minutes is a long time, and sometimes, you know, they do feel a little sluggish. But then, as I said, most of the time, the conclusion is well worth it, and it kind of switches up the whole opinion that you have on what you were watching. One episode that wasn't a drag and then ended with a boom was an episode that was solid throughout. So mad shout out to Twice in a Lifetime, which is an episode that almost moved me to tears. I was on the brink of collapse by the end of the whole thing, and I can't recall any science fiction show of late moving me this much since like Voyager with Admiral Paris. I know, I need to watch For All Mankind, leave me alone. I guess this is a perfect way to transition into the performances. In that specific episode, it is entirely Scott Grimes that carries. He did it last season, he did it again this time. The man is a genius, his talent knows no bounds. Not only is he tasked with keeping the funny alive on this show, but he's also the one that keeps getting given these emotionally heavy scenes. But he nails everything, all of it. I cannot express how good of an actor I think Mr. Grimes is, and if by some remote chance you're watching this, I thank you, sir, for moving me in such a way. Especially considering I have a wife and a daughter, so that whole plot, I talked to me. I couldn't even dare to imagine the trauma I would go through if someone were to randomly knock on the door and then threaten to erase them, seriously. Anyway, he's not the only great actor, of course. The show does deliver some other solid performances. It is a little hit and miss, sadly. I mean, it kinda has always been with the Orville. The thing is, often the dialogue is a little clunky, so what you really need is truly stellar performances to sell the clunkiness, overshadow the clunkiness. But what we have here is good performances, which are good, but not exactly enough to elevate or overshadow said clunkiness. I also can't help but thinking that sometimes some of these actors aren't really doing what they signed up for. Like, they were brought in to be, I guess, comedic. Like, I'm not saying they weren't told it would be dramatic, but I feel like they're being asked to do a lot more than they were originally planned to do. But maybe I'm wrong on that. Moving on, the music, though now and then a little too obviously inspired by, Star Wars, it is good. The VFX are quite acceptable. The makeup and prosthetics are impeccable. I can't express that enough. The costumes too, the sets, the props, I quite enjoyed. They have a more simplistic feel to them than some of the very elaborate designs we're getting in other science fiction nowadays, but it doesn't necessarily take away from the show. I mean, granted, you shouldn't be going into the show expecting, Game of Thrones or the Rings of Power, but they serve their purpose adequately. And I guess the two final things that I wanted to mention is the first episode. As important as it was in terms of story and character development, it came really, really late in the show's progression. An entire half season took place between the Identity two-parter and this, so that watch was impacted by that negatively, sadly. Second, I really didn't like how Dr. Finn wanted to change Isaac all the time. It felt unnatural to fall in love with a being the way they are and then constantly want to make them different. And look, I know Isaac made that cool little nice gesture of giving himself a human form when they were in the holodeck, and so it kind of becomes a bit of a tradition. Every time they go on a date, or, now and then on date night when they go to the holodeck, he takes his human form, and that's cute. It's nice. That's not something that, Finn imposes on him. It's just something that they kind of do out of habit and out of love, I guess. But it really was kind of a nail in the coffin that Isaac couldn't even be his true self, or rather in his true form, for the wedding. I mean, that rubbed me wrong, and I feel like the wedding is an entirely different context than a date night is. Okay, that's it. The Orville New Horizons is a solid season from a show that has a lot of heart. At times, this thing does feel a little amateurish. There are missteps when it comes to the execution of certain story elements, but that is a risk when tackling important current social issues. The cast and the characters are a fun group that I think everyone enjoys spending time with, and I really do think they are the strength of the show. They really are the ones that get you coming back. You want to see what happens to them, you want to see their story and live on with them. This season was in no way the greatest science fiction I've ever seen. It's also not the most inspired or intriguing, but it is a pleasant watch that happens to include one episode I absolutely fell in love with. Just to be clear here, but before I leave you, I don't want you to think that this is in any way a negative review. I really want to make it very clear that this is a positive review. Yes, I don't think this show is the most inspired science fiction that we've ever seen, but that doesn't need to be the case to make a show good. On the contrary, there's a certain, I guess, simplistic maybe isn't the right word, but there's a certain soothingness and calmness to the escapism that the Orville provides that I don't think many shows offer nowadays, and I think that's why a lot of its audience gravitate towards it. It's a very calming show. It's a very fun show, and even though they do indeed tackle current social issues, and even though they are expanding their own lore and dealing with like kind of like galactic issues, there's a certain vibe to it that just isn't present in other shows today, and there's a charming quality that comes with that. So I really think that The Orville is a show that is worth checking out if you're looking for something nice to watch with a warm cup of cocoa on the couch. Yeah, that's it. Hashtag renew The Orville indeed. Thank you all so much for watching. I know I said this in the beginning of the video, but I'm going to say it again. Like, subscribe, share, comment, hit the thanks button. A big thank you to all the channel patrons. You keep the channel alive. And as usual, even though this isn't Star Trek, live long and prosper.